I think that's the story of your career, really, is rising to the challenge.
So you felt like you were working on something really important.
Technology can do all sorts of things, but without public support, it isn't going to go anywhere.
Water was very meaningful. Things really changed for me. And like a lot of engineers, you're just little worker bees, right? You're doing, in your early career, you're just doing a lot of stuff. It spoke to me, changed the world, and it did. How do you create interest and trust? Desalination process is going to remove 99 point, whatever percent, but how do you get that last? It's a world-class problem. It took a world-class team to figure it out, that evolution of something from a kernel of a thought. And when you're taught that early in your career, you think that that's the way it works.
Welcome to the Salty Water Podcast. One of the objectives of this podcast is to spotlight the career of an industry leader. And today I'm pleased to have Lisa Henthorn as our guest. I've known Lisa personally and professionally for nearly 30 years. She's a chemical engineer by training who's had an eclectic and groundbreaking career, initially in desalination and research and development, with a dozen or so patents and/or patent applications to her name. She's designed seawater plants all over the world, and most recently she's been working in the oil and gas sector with high salinity water streams. She served in leadership roles in our professional organizations such as the IDRA, and it's an opportunity to learn today from Lisa what she's learned over the course of her career. So with that, welcome to the Salty Water Podcast, Lisa.
Thanks a lot, Eric. Can't believe it's been 30 years, but you're right.
Almost.
You said that, I'm like, oh my goodness.
Almost, but you started your career at Chevron and then spent more than a decade at the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation in the research and development program. When you look back on those early days, was there a specific moment or project in those years when you thought, this is it, water and desalination are going to be my life's work?
I gave some thought to this question over the last couple of days since you sent it to me. And I try to think back about, it's hard to put yourself back, 40 plus years of when you're starting out and you're kind of making decisions about your career. I think I grew up in the Ozarks in very rural America, and we spent a lot of time outside. And in the Ozarks, there is an enormous amount of beautiful water, springs, lakes, rivers, and I spent a lot of time on those. And so for me, water was very meaningful in terms of it spoke to me. And so as I kind of gravitated into doing, work in water, it just made me feel good. And so I kind of always felt that it worked really well with my personality, and it was something that I cared deeply about. So I always felt privileged to be able to have a job in something that I, was just a part of me. And so I can't pinpoint an exact time, but I think it was because it always felt innate and like the right thing for me to be doing.
And was there something in those early days in research, trying to advance the science and move the ball down the field in terms of technology that sort of really lit the fire and made you feel like you had a purpose?
My early research, I was on the bench scale. We had at the Bureau, we had pilots that we were working on. So it was very hands-on, and there was a lot of lessons, and we had a great team. It was a very collegial environment. But in terms of, a spark, we were really doing a lot of the work to support the development of the Yuma desalting plant, which was the first large-scale desalination plant really in the world, but certainly in the United States. So you felt like you were, we obviously weren't working on the space program, but we were working on something really important. We felt like it was going to change the world, and it did, right? So you felt this innate, this is important. This is something that the whole world can benefit from, and that our work is contributing to that growth and that opportunity for everybody else in the world.
Yeah. Highly motivational then.
Yeah.
So after government research programs, you moved on to private company consulting. You were the global desalination director for CH2M Hill, which at the time was a global large-scale engineering company. You were based in Dubai. Then you moved into C-suite technology roles. If you had to pick one turning point that completely changed the trajectory of your career, what was happening in your life and in the industry at that time?
Yeah, I actually can pinpoint this, I think, pretty clearly as to when things really change for me. And, like a lot of engineers, you're just little worker bees, right? You're doing in your early career, you're just doing a lot of stuff. You're trying to further your own projects, helping support other projects. Everything's always in a team environment. And there was some external sort of opportunities that the Bureau had asked me to serve on some committees and things. And I got to know Dave Farakawa, and who had worked at the Bureau of Reclamation early in his career. But in working with him on some of these external sort of opportunities, or some of it, I think, was the National Water Research Institute and some different activities outside of the Bureau that I was asked to be a part of. He one day asked me if he could nominate me for a board position for the IDA. And it's something I'd never given any thought to. I had been going to IDA meetings. I had been writing papers, and, I had been helping support some of the international desalination programs like MEDRIC and some of the work that SWIC was doing, back in, this time period of the late 80s and through the 90s. That opportunity really then opened up a lot of both doors for me in terms of who I knew and who I got to meet, but also gave me a much better understanding about the business of desalination, right?
Mm-hmm.
And better grasping how we make decisions as an industry and what's important. And it just happened that this opportunity came along, of course, at the same time that the industry was beginning to go through enormous, growth changes in how many desalination plants we were building and so on. So it was just serendipitous for me. It coincided with a time of enormous growth. And so I got to be there when a lot of these decisions were being made, and kind of how do we help the industry? How do we foster this industry and, help its members, but also how do we create these businesses? How do we privatize desalination water supply? What does it mean to these companies and the CEOs around the table in the IDA boardroom that are really the ones on the ground that are implementing, these actions to create this industry? So that him asking me to be on that board, or if he could nominate me, and then my, the opportunities of sitting with these individuals, years and years, really did change, gave me so much broader perspective about our industry. And that's made a big difference.
So a game changer for you
Yeah.
to rise up into the level of the global community, so to speak.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Speaking of the global community, I mean, engineering and desalination have taken you all over the world. You've lived and worked in the Middle East, Asia, Australia on large desalination and water plants. Is there a certain story or experience from one of these projects that really captures what you feel like on the ground when a community gets reliable water for the first time, or for the second time for that matter?
Yeah. I don't always get to work with kind of the public or the community, right? So my touchstone to the people that benefit from it has not always been, a very close relationship, unfortunately. Now, there were times when the work in Singapore, for instance, on the reuse facilities, and I wasn't intimately involved in those projects, but I did, tangentially, I got to visit them. CH2M Hill did a lot of that work, very, foundational work, frankly. And as a function of that, in my work with CH2M Hill, I got to be, I got to visit it. I got to be part of it, got to understand kind of how they were doing everything, and then kind of expanding that work into the seawater desalination, because it started with the new water and all of the reuse. And visiting the visitor center that they developed as a function of that project and all of the new water activities touched me very, very deeply in terms of what this really meant to a community that had been reliant on another country for their water supply, and to be such a tiny country, right? And yet be vulnerable in that way, and to see what a difference that made. It was a very heartwarming experience. And that visitor center, as you probably know, is not there now. But I've actually used that experience recently as we are looking at how do you um, create interest and trust around produced water and being able to treat it to a water quality standard that could be beneficial to the communities around it. And so I've used that vision that was created around the new water to better try to plan for how, you take a very difficult water supply and be able to demonstrate that its purity and acceptance to communities. And so it is like so much, right? It all kind of goes into a circle. And so now kind of taking those experiences back and applying them to now
Yeah.
to resolve or solve another big problem.
And for context, I mean, Singapore, as you said, is a small country. It was reliant on water from Malaysia, which created political and strategic security issues. And so they committed to a big program to take wastewater and essentially make it drinkable in order to be independent on their supply. And as you said, a lot of the technology was innovated, developed, and implemented in those years in Singapore.
Yeah, and the public outreach portion of it was really groundbreaking, right? I mean, Water Factory 21 in California had done a lot of the, foundational work around how do you reach the communities, but there were a lot of challenges like in San Diego, experienced, and how do you really communicate the value proposition to the communities? And so the new water, all of those activities around that wastewater reuse was really important then to take that information and see how psychologically, you can bring science information to the public in an efficient and effective way that, is a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, without the technology can do all sorts of things, but without public support, it isn't going to go anywhere.
Exactly.
You need that part of it. So you brought up produced water, and that is a good segue. Most recently, you've been known for connecting desalination, produced water, and reuse in your work at Water Standard and Aris Water Solutions. Again, is there a project where that circular water mindset really clicked for a client or a community in a way that surprised you or found to be interesting?
Yeah, it's a great question. And all of these are, questions that really made me think back. But a few years ago, and really in kind of 2021, Ramesh Sharma and I kind of put our heads together and we're kind of thinking about, how do we really change the cost dynamics around treating very high salinity produced water in places like the Permian Basin, where we are more and more restricted about how we can dispose of this water, but yet there's an enormous water resource there that's completely untapped, but is expensive to thermally desalinate. And so he works for ConocoPhillips, and we were, looking at the different technologies that might be applicable, that could be real game changers. And so we thought of it in the context of, okay, this is a small project we're going to go and do, and we're going to demonstrate this and kind of, well, as we began talking, it garnered more and more interest, right? And so then we had other very large oil companies all joining and creating a really what we refer to in the industry as a joint industry project with a number of large contributors to the overall economics, but also their scientific and technical contribution to form an amazing technical team to solve this really big problem. It grew from just this kernel of something we felt was important to do to where we ended up testing many technologies. And in fact, the project is still ongoing and it's grown into, past the pilot stage into, kind of the next stage towards commercialization. So it was interesting to see the enthusiasm, the passion, the technical wherewithal that everybody has brought to the table to create a really, huge advancements in something that was, was very much needed. So it was great to be a part of it for the last.
Just for context, you're talking about produced water, which is coming up with oil and gas as a function of the production of that oil and gas. And you 80, 100,000 TDS. I mean, what is the challenge greater than
Yeah.
that?
Now we thought we were going to be probably at 110,000, but we were largely testing over the last few years at 130,000 up to, I think, 165,000 milligrams per liter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, how do you do that in a membrane system, right?
Right.
That was the real trick. And so, and not just the desalination portion of it, but because this water does, the origin is with oil and gas, then there are other contaminants that are in the water. They are part of unconventional production, or fracking, as people refer to hydraulic fracturing. And so there are, constituents associated with the hydraulic fracturing process as well. So from a environmental perspective, or industrial use perspective, it's like, well, how do you clean all of those contaminants out? Okay, the desalination process is going to remove 99 point whatever percent, but how do you get that last, right? And so it's much bigger than just the desalination portion. How do you do all the pre-treatment? How do you do all the post-treatment? What's involved? And then still manage the economics. So it's a world-class problem. It took a world-class team to figure it out.
Are you generally optimistic that there's success at the end of the rainbow
No,
there?
absolutely. We've been able to demonstrate it on a pilot level scale of a number of different membrane approaches that can be used. They're moving to the next scale, and commercialization is right around the corner. So it is moving forward, and so it's exciting to see again that evolution of something from a kernel of a thought. And it takes a lot of years, if you added up all of the hours that were spent between all of these, this broad team, how many man hours it took, or staff hours it took to accomplish. It's a lot. It's a lot of effort, but it's, a very satisfying process.
That's good.
Too.
That's great.
A lot of challenges along the way, but
yeah, well, I think that's the story of your career, really, is rising to the challenge. So good on you. You've led organizations like the International Desalination and Reuse Association, the Produced Water Society. You served on the corporate board as chairman of the H2O Innovation's board of directors. When you think about your legacy, is there a particular person you mentored or a decision you made that you hope the next generation of water professionals will still be talking about in 20 years from now?
Well, this question, of course, brings in so many kind of happy thoughts from, your career. And most of those happy thoughts are associated with the people, right? Yeah, you go and you try to do, really cool things and make things work technically, but all the memories are the people. And the big part of that, of course, is the young people that, have come up in our industry. I had great role models, being in the Bureau of Reclamation, especially, it was a very giving environment. You never felt like, oh, this is my little fiefdom and I have to protect it. It was always, how can I help you? And when you're taught that early in your career, you think that that's the way it works. And part of, being part of the federal government, nobody owned something, right? This was all public information. And so you grow up to be, in your career, to be very sharing. And it took some adjustment going in the private sector, because now you got to, protect things and stuff. But I think I was mentored in a very healthy way of how to help people and how to have teams prosper and enable them to accomplish, really important things. And that then has enabled me to be able to mentor a lot of people, and a lot of wonderful people over the years that mean so much to me. And a number of them now that I still work closely with, and and you watch their careers flourish. And that's what's so satisfying, is to see them then have the same opportunities that you were given, and see then what they do with it, right? What they do with that opportunity. And that's part of the beauty of the whole process.
Yeah, and one final question, I guess. When you started out, there weren't as many women in engineering as there are today. You go to the conferences today, and it's I don't know if it's 50-50, but it's definitely more than it was 30, 40 years ago. But what would you say to women who are interested in a career in engineering, given what it's done for you and the opportunities that it provided, and Would you be supportive and encouraging for women to get involved in the field?
I hope that just hearing what I have to say over the last, 20, 30 minutes, it's been an amazing career. And I encourage women absolutely uh, to look at it. It's something that gives you the chance to see the world, frankly, if that's what you want to do.
Right.
And eventually to, control your own destiny. If you really work in a particular area and you focus and become really good at it, there's just an enormous opportunity, and things are always changing. I mean, engineers, you think about, well, what can AI, how's it going to change engineering? There's going to always be a really important role. It'll look different than what it is today, but there's always going to be problems to solve. Water, specifically, I think is a fantastic field for women because it is part of life. It does feel really, you feel it deep in yourself that this is something important that we should care about and we should take care of. And so it kind of fosters those sort of feelings that I think women align with very well. So
Sure.
I've always been a huge proponent and like to see more and more of them.
Oh, great. Well, that brings us to the end of our time today, and I want to thank you very much for spending your time with us and sharing a little bit about your career. It's been a great one, and hopefully people will appreciate your journey and take it to heart.
Thank you so much, Eric.